Welcome to Between Two Chairs, Demystifying Commercial Real Estate, the podcast that brings you the latest insights and trends on the South Florida commercial real estate market, with your hosts, Fernando Arencibia Jr. and Jennifer Woolman. In each episode, we dive into the world of commercial real estate and break down complex concepts to make them accessible for everyone. Whether you're a real estate professional, a curious investor, or just interested in the South Florida market in general, Between Two Chairs is the podcast for you. So pull up a chair and join us.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Between Two Chairs. My name is Fernando Arencibia, and with me, as always, is the bus driver that is Jennifer Woolman. Jennifer, say hi.
Hi, and I want to clarify, I was never the bus driver. I was only a passenger.
See, this is part of the problem because, you know, in my mind, you're driving the bus. The fact that you don't know you're driving the bus is concerning.
This bus, I'm sorry, I thought you meant the bus at the Women's Real Estate Investment
It's a little
Summit.
concerning to the people that are riding the bus that the bus driver doesn't know that they're driving the bus.
I'm driving the bus. Let me grab the steering wheel.
I love it. I love it. So, Jennifer, you got to do one of the coolest things. Because even though I don't attend, I love seeing all the posts in social media, all the energy that is generated by this, women investing in real estate conference that Beth Azor, has put together year over year. I know you're an incredible supporter of this event and you attend every year. So this is an episode that I always look forward to because now I really get to know a little bit about what you guys were talking about.
Depends you were in the room. You have so much FOMO when I take pictures of everybody.
I do. I get a lot of FOMO.
Was there this year.
Oh my goodness.
And Dina Zimmerman.
Wow. Really?
Yeah.
Oh
so
man.
I didn't do any
incredible.
selfies with them because for some reason, whenever I take pictures at that summit, they look right, but they post upside down.
Okay. First of all, we have got to figure this out. And maybe your daughter Karina can give you some pointers.
Summit. No, it's the weirdest thing.
I'm sorry, but it happened at the CREI as well. You started posting pictures.
They couldn't figure it out, by the way.
The pictures come upside down. I have never seen that before. I don't know why it keeps happening, but we got to figure something out.
I like turning commercial real estate on its head, I guess. You like that one?
Talk about branding. Oh, she's fast, ladies and gentlemen. She is fast. I love it. So tell me a little bit about the experience this year.
So as you mentioned, this is my favorite conference of the year because it is the one conference that has propelled me to really move, not my career, but my investing. A lot of times we go to conferences to help build our careers, to help build our business, but those are sideline ways to build your wealth, whereas this gives you hands-on instructions. It's for women in a safe space to be able to share their knowledge or lack thereof and their dreams and wishes and goals. So this was the 6th year. I've been to every single one of them, including the one that didn't happen because I was, I think, the only person who registered right before COVID. And so Beth obviously gave me the money back and we didn't do it. And then during COVID, she decided to take it online. And I think that was actually the huge push that we needed because people were dying to get knowledge and information and see other people and stuff. And so her mission is to increase the number of women who invest in real estate. She had heard a statistic at one of the conferences years ago that she had attended that said that only 3% of commercial real estate is owned by women, and meaning owned by women, not where they were a co-signer on a husband's loan or brought into the deal for financing or whatever, but where they actually owned the deal. So she threw out that this year that her goal is to increase that to 30%. We have no idea how we're necessarily going to measure that other than we stand up every year, like who's invested because of this, for the first time. I had invested before, but in single family residences, and I had been involved in one office syndication before, but meeting this group of women who are so incredible. I mean, some of the things like this year, there was another military wife. It seems like every year there's either somebody who was in military service or who's a military wife, and they're trying to figure out how to make income in the United States while they're overseas. And their stories are incredible. These women, not only are they dealing with moving all the time and having families that work in a position that's extremely stressful, they're doing things that a lot of other women are afraid of. They're afraid of failing. They're afraid of doing this. Like fear, if it's in their vocabulary, they have the courage to overcome it and do it anyway. And so we meet all these great women, and they tell you what they're doing, how they're doing it. But I mean, down to the details. Like this year, the military wife, her name is Susie Sevier, and she was living overseas. I want to say she was in Germany. I think she was in Germany because another military woman was here from Germany. She flew all the way from Germany to attend this conference. Susie started investing in multifamily real estate while she was overseas in Oklahoma. And so she goes through the whole story, how they did it, how she started learning about it, how she managed properties, being overseas, how she found the deals, how she financed the deals, etc. And I think she owns something like 700 units now. It's insane. Anyway, so this conference goes through all of the steps that are needed. It helps you connect with other people, and these women give of their knowledge and their time so freely. I've invested with several of them over the years because it was stuff that I never really wanted to own. Like I knew it should be in my portfolio, but I didn't want to deal with the headaches. I invested with Natasha. We've interviewed her before. I invested last year in a hotel. I invested in a car wash. So different things that normally, like I'm not going to go out and buy a car wash because I don't want to deal with the business side, but I like the idea of the accelerated depreciation that I could get to offset some of my taxes, etc. Just to give you an idea, some of the quotes, and anybody who knows Beth, I mean, you can't meet Beth and not immediately love her and embrace her. She's just one of these people who create so much impact in the life of everybody she touches, and she's very passionate about her mission and her goals. And so some of her quotes as she was opening up the conference were, "Silence doesn't build wealth and fear doesn't build legacy." There was another sentence in there, but I couldn't write fast enough. But I thought those are super, super strong. And the idea behind the silence doesn't build wealth is, the old days we were all taught, you don't talk about sex, money, and religion. Well, her point here is if you're not talking about money, you're not aware. And she told the story of how she thought she was making really good money until one woman who was in the same field as, who was also a CRE broker said, I couldn't believe it. They finally gave me the raise that I wanted up to X. And Beth was like, what? What do you mean that's how much you make? And it was like 3 times what Beth was making. And she's like, if that woman hadn't had the courage to tell me what she was making, right? Because we think if we talk about money, we're bragging, or we're breaking the taboo, or we're showing off, or whatever it is, right? So I loved that story. And so all of these women who do the deal, so it starts out, it's 2 full days. So the first day, it's all panel discussions with different women coming up who have invested, what they invest in, what they do. There's always a theme. Last year's theme was Think Bigger. This year's theme, which I love, and I'll get into the story later, is Buy the Block, B-U-Y, the block. And she came up with this before the woman who introduced her came on stage and told her story. But the whole setup is she interviews different women investors the first day, and then the next day or later on the first day, we all break out. There are different breakout rooms, and each of the speakers has a breakout room where they talk about a topic, or they do a deep dive on a deal. Or we had a woman that she's actually an AI specialist who also invests in a ton of real estate, and she talked about how she uses AI to help her with her investing. There was another woman who was amazing too. She's an attorney and she owns like a bunch of property, but she didn't speak about her property in her deal. She spoke about creative financing that she's used both as an attorney and as a buyer and seller of commercial real estate. So then you go into these breakouts, and in these breakouts, the ones who are doing the deals talk specifically about the money, and they show you, this is how much I invested, this is how much I made, this is how much I invested, this is how much I made. And you get a really good overview, and it helps you connect the dots with your goals and your background and your expertise, whether it's expertise in investing or whether for a lot of us in the room are just commercial brokers, right?
In your experience attending these conferences and observing, what becomes, aside from the mental block and the fear, once you overcome that and you go out and you make that effort to invest, what is the biggest obstacle, you would say? Is it a lack of access to capital or not knowing how to put a deal together?
Mostly it's the thought of lack of access to capital or the actual lack. Like our first, I don't know if it was our first year, but it was one of the first conferences. It must have been the second or third year because we were already at the Meridian, but they did a panel of speakers of lenders, and they were women lenders, and there were 3 of them on stage. And Beth asked, out of all, and most of them had been doing commercial lending for 10 years or more, and they said, in all of your years, what percentage of women have applied for and gotten a loan? And like one woman said never. Another woman said less than 1%. And the other one I think also said like never unless she had a male co-signer. So that was one. And Beth does bring in her own lenders. And you and I know from putting deals together for our clients and stuff too, that it depends on your story and your experience and everything else, but also knowing which type of lenders to go to, right? So a lot of the community banks and the local banks do a better job than the nationals do of lending independently. And now there are some banks that are trying to do a better push, and they're saying, okay, we need to increase the number of women that are getting loans, because they realize that, especially like in single family homes and stuff, the number of women that are the main buyers are now women versus before it was men or married couples, right? Yeah. And that number has increased exponentially. So anyway, so that's one thing. Another quote that she had was, sunlight builds confidence and confidence builds courage. So she says, even though you might be afraid of failure, afraid of not getting the financing, of looking stupid, of whatever it is, get over it and just have the courage to move forward in spite of the fear. And then she says, growth does not happen in comfort, which you and I talk about a lot. We talked about that when we, jumped, left our cozy jobs before and started Avanti Way Commercial. We always say, be comfortable being uncomfortable. And she pushes that all the time. And then her other thing is, do the hard things on purpose, because most people don't want to do the hard things. Anyway, so that was that was what kicked off the conference.
Say that again. So who said that about do the hard things on purpose?
Beth.
Okay. Yeah. How do you interpret that statement? Do the hard things on purpose?
Well, so, especially I think of it like from a broker standpoint, right? It's really easy to find properties if you go on the MLS or you go on the third-party platforms. It's easy to get information off of there. But boots on the ground, walking, talking, picking up the phone, calling the owners and tenants in a neighborhood is a lot harder. Yeah. But it's then just going on your third-party platform and saying, oh, this is the asking rent, this is so that's a hard thing. Consistency, and this is my interpretation, this isn't Beth saying what's hard. Consistency is really hard. Being consistent, especially being consistent when you're not getting results. And we talk about this often too, is that, we do live, especially with social media and Amazon Prime, right? We live with this instant gratification society, and it's only accelerating because everything's happening so rapidly that we expect a text. Like if I text you, I want an answer within, even if it's just a thumbs up or I'll get right back to you or whatever, within like seconds almost, So I think, and if we don't get that when we're doing our social media, or we don't get an instant yes when we do a phone call. Beth shared an experience at the end of the conference. We get on a bus, which is why I said I didn't drive the bus. I was just a passenger on the bus. But we get on a bus and she takes us by the properties that she owns. And then we went by a property that Natasha bought and toured that. And, she's telling the story about how she was in touch with somebody for, I don't know, like 9 years before she was able to buy the property. And when she did get it, the big guys were like, oh my God, you got so lucky. I can't believe you got that property. We've been after them forever. And she's like, well, how long? And they're like, 12 months. And she's like, and you tried 9 years, right? Like, I don't know if I would have that stamina, right? And we spoke about this when we were training an agent the other day who said, I want to go after this listing. It was listed before. It's not listed anymore. How many times do I call and reach out and everything else? And we said forever. If it's something that you really want to get, it's forever. And you have an example of a client that you worked with for 10 years and it wasn't even a client, right? It wasn't a client for 10 years. You just consistently kept in touch, providing value, etc. And 10 years later, it became a client, because you provided value to that person over 10 years. And I think those are the hard things, right? Because 10 years is a long time.
See, when I hear that statement about doing the hard things on purpose, what I get out of it is that there's an opposite to that statement, which is doing the hard things not on purpose, meaning that you're going to have to do the hard things regardless. Mm-hmm. But it is a totally different mindset to jump into it and say, I'm going to do that hard part first, rather than avoid it. And then inevitably I have to deal with it. Right? Because the on-purpose part is what's powerful about that statement to me.
Right, but this isn't really, to me, this statement isn't eat the frog first. Everyone says eat the frog first, right?
Right.
And to me, this isn't. This is more look at the hard part of whatever your goal is.
Yeah.
And, don't try to take the easy way out or sidestep it, do the hard thing. And a lot of times Beth tells these stories and I'm like, oh my God, I would never
but what I'm
sit
saying
there
to
and
you
do it,
is that, and I've heard that before as well, eat the hard first, do the things that create butterflies in your stomach first, anything that scares you first, that I get. But there are people who just believe that I might never have to eat the frog. So for me, the statement is you're going to have to eat the frog anyway, sooner or later. And it might not, the frog may not be the phone call or the person to person or the knocking on the door or whatever. It might be that, now you're going to have to find another job or you're going to have to do other things because things are not working out. It is inevitable. You're going to have to eat the frog. So whether you do it first or in the middle or whatever, but do it on purpose. Don't let it, jump to you.
Yeah, don't let it happen to you.
Don't let it happen to you. Be intentional. So that I really love that statement. I think that's very powerful.
And then I took another note, and I can't remember if this was from.
So when you're in the breakout session and you guys are breaking down deals, are you able to do like a Q&A or is it just presentation? Oh yeah.
No, we do Q&A, and it was so cool. Like Mandy McAllister, she is one of the founders of program, like a motivational program and networking program called GoBundance. But she's also a big multifamily investor. And she says, look, I consider myself multifamily, but I knew this woman who was very, very good at short-term rentals. And I found this opportunity of a motel. And she's like, a motel is kind of like multifamily. They're little units. They're not, they don't have a lot. And so I partnered with this short-term rental person and we bought a motel about an hour outside of where she has most of her stuff. And she says, and the reason I felt comfortable buying it was because of this woman here who owns motels. And I picked her brain and we spoke and we talked. And so you have these connections that you're able to say, hey, this is where I think I want to go. How do I get there? And we always talk about connecting the dots. And one of the women there who introduced Beth, it was goosebump and tearful moment because she was there last year and, with the Think Bigger. And she's like, you get home from this conference, like most conferences, and your brain's going a million miles a minute and you're trying to figure out if you do conferences right, you always try to have takeaways, right? At least what are your 3 takeaways and what are you going to implement from the conference? Because if you're just going to collect business cards and sit there and be spoken to, you're not really doing conferences, right? So she did like a debrief with herself and went through her notes and started connecting the dots. And she owns luxury short-term rentals in a couple of them in Miami and in North Carolina. And she wanted to expand a little bit and do something else. And so she started connecting ideas from last year's conference, and she's like, okay, I remember this woman said buy the block, which is where we got the name from where Beth took the inspiration for this year, and this was before she heard this woman's story. And this woman who said buy the block is an investor in luxury student housing. It was hers, and then another idea was from another woman who says, we only buy in secondary and tertiary markets because there's not as much competition. It tends to be an easier entry point. And so she started taking her notes and piecing them together. And she picked a community. She picked an area that she was familiar with because they had gone to school there, both she and her husband. And she said, I'm going to start looking there and playing with this idea. She bought 2.5 acres of, parcel by parcel within 1 year. And now she's building student housing. And it was like a goosebump moment. And Beth is like, this is the best story ever. And the woman said, I never would have had, she refinanced her house. She's like, we were almost ready to pay off our house and we refinanced it and took out a ton of equity to be able to do this. She says, I never would have done that if I didn't have this group and this network pushing me and sharing ideas. And she had a lot of help from the woman who was a luxury student housing person and another woman who was there who does ground up development in Orlando. And that was also from a previous summit. So anyway, so that's why I say to me, this conference is the best. If you're a woman that already invests in real estate, you need to be there to share your story and meet people if you're looking for funding for your deals, because we invest in each other's deals. We get a lot of opportunity to be presented deals. None of them are endorsed by Beth, right? It's just a platform where we get together and you put in, I have a deal, I want to invest in a deal, what do I want to do? There were a lot of people there that were doing fix and flips, including land flip. So super, super interesting. And then it opens up your eyes to things that, I'm like, oh, okay.
Have you ever sat down to write down what all of these, obviously you've been going to a conference for a number of years, and you have been presented by these women that have invested. You yourself are an investor. You've participated in the deals. Have you looked at what are the commonalities among all of these investors?
So it's really interesting. And this question came up actually from an ICSC panel that Beth was on with our friend Jennifer Forbes. Okay. And it was a women's panel up at ICSC. And Jennifer said, look, I got into this at the same time because these were women who have been in commercial real estate for a really long time when they were the minority. And Jennifer said, I was a tomboy. I was a tomboy growing up. And you look at Jennifer Forbes and you're like, you are a tomboy because she's always dressed to the nines. She's, very, very feminine. She's like, I was a total tomboy. And so Beth said, I'm sorry, I love that. I was a tomboy too. And then she asked how many people on this panel were tomboys, and they all raised their hand. In this group of women, she asked this year, how many of you were tomboys? And 3/4 of the room raised their hand. So I thought that was super interesting too. Anyway, so I think that's one of the commonalities. The other commonality is, and it's funny because there's no real other commonality in the sense that there are a lot of introverts that they're like, oh my gosh, like you don't understand, me getting up here is scarier than any deal I've ever done, and other ones who are super bubbly and, are willing to talk about everything all the time and they're extroverted. I think the big thing for most of the women is that they'd been thinking about it for a while and they did the research and they just decided to do it and they'd figure it out as they go. None of them knew everything. They all talk about the failures that they have because they said, you go on TikTok, you go on Instagram and everything's perfect and I love that they share that because when I first started investing, I was like, oh my God, that person's so look, they have all that stuff and everything went great, right? I buy a property and a hurricane blew through and the septic tank, totally flooded and my tenants had to leave because, the septic tanks were all floating in this area. So, and it ended up being fine. We ended up making really good money on the property, but those things happen, but people don't always share the bad, right? They just share the good. And so these women are like, the deals, and that's the other thing. They're like, this deal was a nightmare. And they tell you, this is what happened. It looked great. It looked this, but this is what happened as I was developing it. Or this is what happened, the financial crisis happened 3 weeks after we closed, or COVID happened the minute I got my last tenant in, and they talk about it and they talk about how they get through the rough spots or what they had to do. And then at the end, they show you the numbers and they're like, so, you're not making money from day one, probably, so you're going to have headaches. You're going to have, so the fact that they literally open up their, their whole information and experience,
there's resiliency,
100% transparency. And these are women who don't give up.
The other thing that I find that I think is very impactful, and we've had this conversation even with our own agents, is that they have a point of view. Mm-hmm. They all have parameters within which they want to invest. Like you mentioned, the person that says we invest in second and tertiary markets. It doesn't mean that you cannot deviate once you have your set. But every successful investor I have found has a very specific thesis for their investment in real estate.
We call it the buy box. So I have my buy box. Like if I'm buying on my own, this is what I want to invest in. But I don't want to, with multifamily, I'm not going to go out and buy a multifamily. Yeah. Jennifer Woolman is not going to, but I love investing in it. Same thing with a car wash. Yeah. I'm not going to go buy a car wash. Right. But I love the benefits of what it has, and what it allowed me to do. So I'm happy to invest in that. And that's the other thing is if we're the GP, we're focusing the general partner in a syndication, or if I'm buying by myself or my family, I'm buying within my buy box. But that doesn't mean I'm not going to invest in somebody else's buy box, right? Yeah. Because that allows me diversity of area. It also allows me to learn about different asset classes. There's another asset class that I'm looking at that I really like. And after this year, I'm starting to connect the dots and everything. Yeah. And I think eventually, probably in the next 3 years, 2 to 3 years, I'll probably end up buying for our family that asset class. But I'm dipping my toes in the water to learn more about it as an LP. Yeah. So I'm limited partners. So
I love it.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Where do you see this conference growing?
We were just talking about that last year because we've had it for, I think, 3 years now at Le Meridien in Dania Point, which is an amazing hotel, by the way, if you guys ever need a place to do something.
It really is very nice for an event, for sure.
The service is amazing. The food is amazing. The staff is helpful. They're smiling.
The Independent Retailer Awards was there too.
Yeah, a while ago, a couple years ago. Yeah. So so we've been doing it there, and just yesterday I was speaking with somebody who was there, and we were talking about next year and kind of debriefing from this year's conference, and we're like, I don't know, it's getting pretty big. We don't know if we're going to be able to have it at the same place. And it was great because there are a handful of us that go every year. Yeah. But there were so many new people this year. We're always trying to bring in new people, and like moms bring their daughters, right? I went twice with Corinna, and you try to bring in other women that you think have the interest or the desire to learn more and who want to invest in real estate, and give them that safe space to learn. So I don't know if it outgrows it. Like Beth always does an early release. If at the end of the conference you buy for next year, we have no idea what the date or where the location is. And that was the first week.
Well, that tells you how impactful it is to the people that show up.
And now it doesn't go on sale for the rest until September, when we know the date and we know,
So one last thing I wanted to ask you, because I've always heard about the genesis of this idea and this 3%. Do we know if that number has moved at all?
Don't know, because we keep trying to find where it came from, and it was from a conference that she was at with a big like national lender or something, and we've been trying to find that quote. We don't know how we would measure the 30% either, especially like when you buy real estate. A lot of times it's in an LLC and you can't see who owns it or but I think most lenders would be able to track
that for sure. Well, that's awesome. Any last parting thoughts?
Any last parting thoughts? Let me see. So let me give you a quote from one of the keynote speaker was a woman named Erin Bradley. She had some great quotes, and she's an investor in real estate. And her story is amazing. She had this desire. She had a mortgage company and she wanted to move. And she's like, if I move, I'm going to let people down, whatever. She moved and her business exploded, and she opened up another branch in the city where she moved. She has a company. She's a public speaker. It's called Pursuing Freedom, and you can follow her on Instagram. But she had a couple of great quotes. She said, "Let imposter syndrome be the inspiration that drives you." And then she says, "We get used to tolerating less than our full potential." And I thought that was...
We get used to tolerating less than our full potential. Wow.
Right. I thought that was really good. And then she said, "Let go of who you've been and embrace who you are going to become." Like we keep saying, one day I want to do this. One day I want to do that. She goes, life is unknown. You might not get that one day. And she said, so if there's something that you want to do that you're putting off, so do this statement: "I wish I could XYZ, go live somewhere else in this little town that she wanted to move to, but," and you write down the excuse, and then you write down the because, and then you do it anyway. And she said she's now lived in that town for 10 years and they're doing amazing and her business has grown. And she was actually able to sell her business and do what she wanted. I would be a public speaker, right? And so now she created this Pursuing Freedom company, and she's doing extremely well. So I thought those are the type of motivational insights that gets us out of our head and think...
For sure.
Because it's really easy to say, I want to take that vacation, but I've got work, I've got this conference, I've got the kids, I can't really afford it. Whatever excuses we make, right? Those are the buts. And then, I want to do this because, I want to do this because I want to slow down, or I want to change careers, or because my husband retired, or because my kids moved there, whatever it is. And she goes, and then you come up with you come up with your why, and the because is kind of your why.
That is a very, very important starting point, is to have a really big why.
Right.
Because the path is to the point of those investors that have shared with everybody that, it looks shiny from the outside, but it is a lot of work and you have to overcome a lot of things.
Correct.
To make it happen. Well, thank you everybody for joining us on
the bus ride.
On another, exactly. So look, what is your buy box? I think that is an important aspect. I think that's a great way to sum up something that is a little bit more complex. How about you? Will you be attending the Women Real Estate Investment Summit next year? It looks like it is very impactful and very, very powerful. I do have FOMO every time my partner goes every year, but I'm so glad that that we have these moments of debrief. And for me, definitely, I love that statement of do the hard things on purpose. I think that makes a lot of sense. So for Jennifer and I, thank you for pulling up a chair and joining us. Until next time, say bye, Jennifer.
Bye. Beep, beep.
So the other day, I'm rushing out of the house like I usually do. And I'm a little hungry, so I wanted to get, grab some breakfast. So I made my version of a banana bread. It was toast and a banana. That's what I'm down to. Okay, Corinna. All right, that's what I'm down to. All right, toast and a banana. That's all right. It's all right. It worked out. I'm just loving your laughter, Jennifer. It's like.
Well, she did say that she had to work on breaking you out of
banana bread jail.
Yeah, banana bread jail.
I love it.
What is her name? No,
You're ready. What's her name?
Banana Rosanna Donna. Right, let's see.
We are properly caffeinated. We're ready to go.
I don't know about properly caffeinated. I guess I am because my tongue is stuck.